Hey, sweetie, look at me.
A small boy clutching an old train token stands shivering in a Chicago pharmacy as a blizzard howls outside. When security moves to throw him out, a handsome CEO steps in, and what begins as a single act of kindness becomes a night that will change both of their lives forever. Will this stranger keep his promise when dawn comes? Snow spiraled through the air like torn silver paper, sticking to the glass doors of the neighborhood pharmacy. Inside, the fluorescent lights flickered over half-empty shelves, and a line of restless customers bundled in heavy coats. The heater rattled, fighting a losing battle against the cold seeping in through the cracks. Near the back aisle, a boy no taller than the counter stacked coins one by one onto the register. His fingers were red, cracked from cold, the nails rimmed with dirt. "Please," he said softly, his voice almost lost under the hum of the overhead vents. "I just need the milk powder and these heat patches." The cashier sighed, glancing towards the security guard, a bulky man whose patience had already worn thin. "You short $2, kid," the cashier said flatly. "We can't split the box." "I can come back tomorrow," the boy whispered. "I'll bring more coins." The guard's boots creaked as he stepped closer. "Hey, no loitering. Take what you got and move along." Before the boy could speak again, the door slid open, letting in a blast of wind, and a man whose presence changed the entire room. Evan Lark stepped through the doorway in a charcoal wool coat, snow melting on his shoulders. His blue eyes flicked from the checkout line to the trembling child. The guard straightened immediately, recognition flashing across his face. Everyone knew who Evan Lark was. Tech visionary, billionaire, founder of Lark Systems, the company whose AI managed half the city's power grid. Evan had come only for cough drops and sleep medication after another night buried in server code. But the sight of the boy stopped him cold. The boy's lips moved, again quieter this time. "Please, sir, don't make me leave. I need an adult so they'll let us in at the shelter." The guard barked, "Enough, kid." Evan's voice cut through, calm but firm. "I'll handle it." The guard hesitated. "Mr. Lark, this kid's been hanging around all day. I said I'll handle it." Evan stepped forward, his polished shoes clicking on the tile. He looked down at the pile of coins, then at the boy. 8, maybe 9, his coat 2 sizes too big, sleeves dragging over his hands. "You're buying these for someone else?" Evan asked. "My sister," the boy said quickly. "She's little." The heater broke. Evan didn't question further. He pulled out his card and handed it to the cashier. "Ring up the formula, the heat patches, and 2 of those fleece blankets by the counter." The cashier swiped the card wordlessly, bagging the items with cautious efficiency. When she handed over the bag, the boy looked up in disbelief. Evan knelt slightly, bringing himself to the boy's eye level. "What's your name?" "Ben," he said, clutching the bag like it might vanish. "All right, Ben. Where's your mother?" "In the hospital." "Pneumonia." His voice cracked on the word. "They said she might come home when she can breathe better. But they won't let us in the family shelter unless an adult signs us in." Evan hesitated, the snow from his coat dripping slowly onto the linoleum. He had a meeting in 20 minutes, an entire board waiting for his approval on the city's new AI rollout. Yet something about the boy's steady gaze, quiet, desperate, dignified, unraveled his composure. "Which shelter?" he asked finally. "The one on Oak and Birch." "It's warm. I just need an adult." Evan exhaled, a visible plume of breath even indoors. "Then let's go." Ben blinked. "You'll come with me?" "Just for tonight." The boy's eyes filled, not quite with tears, but relief. Together they stepped back into the storm. Evan held his umbrella low over the boy's head as the wind roared through the empty street. The streetlights cast halos through the snowfall, and the sound of their footsteps, one heavy, one light, echoed between shuttered storefronts. Halfway down the block, Ben turned, voice trembling but proud. "Thank you, sir. My mom says kind people don't need to promise. They just show up Evan didn't answer. He only tightened his grip on the umbrella and kept walking, wondering when he'd last shown up for anyone. Snow hissed across the windshield as Evan's sedan crawled down the slush-coated street. The heater blasted on high, fogging the windows from the inside. Ben sat in the passenger seat, hugging the shopping bag to his chest like a shield. The city outside was barely visible, just faint shapes of stoplights and snowplows pushing through drifts. "Is it far?" Evan asked, eyes on the dim road ahead. "Not really," Ben said, voice muffled against the bag. "Just past the rail bridge." Evan glanced sideways. The boy was small, even for 8, his cheeks hollow, but his posture was stubbornly straight. He had the kind of quiet resilience Evan recognized in himself, except this child hadn't chosen it. The silence between them stretched until Ben spoke again. "Are you really going to pretend to be my uncle?" Evan hesitated, then nodded. "If that's what you need tonight." Ben exhaled, a shudder of relief that fogged the window. "They won't let us in without one. Said too many people lie." "What about your dad?" Ben looked down at his lap. "He worked on the trains. There was an accident last winter. Mom said he helped people get off before it crashed. She said the tracks froze faster than anyone thought that they could." Evan's fingers tightened on the steering wheel. "I'm sorry," he said softly. Ben just nodded, pulling something from his coat pocket, a small brass token on a chain, worn smooth with age. "He gave me this. Said it was for luck." The token caught a glint of dashboard light. "It's from the Green Line. The last one before he—" His voice trailed off. Evan swallowed hard. "That's a good thing to keep." Ben rubbed the token with his thumb. "I use it to remember the way home." The car rolled to a stop outside a narrow brick building with boarded windows and a handwritten sign taped to the door. "Family Shelter. Open until capacity." Ben unbuckled quickly, his breath fogging the cold glass. "Thank you for the ride, sir." Evan cut the engine. "You said they won't let you in without an adult." Ben blinked. You mean you'll come inside?" Evan nodded, buttoning his coat. "Let's make sure you and your sister have a place to sleep." They trudged through knee-deep snow toward the entrance. The shelter smelled faintly of disinfectant and damp wool. A woman at the front desk looked up, weary-eyed behind wire glasses. "We're full," she said automatically. Ben stepped forward. "Please, ma'am. We called earlier. They said we could stay if our uncle came." The woman eyed Evan skeptically. His tailored coat, polished shoes, and expensive watch didn't fit the usual picture. "You're their uncle?" Evan met her gaze evenly. "Yes, just for tonight." Her eyes softened as she looked at the boy clutching the bag. "Names?" "Ben and Maya," the boy said quickly. She typed something into a terminal, frowned, then sighed. "We've got one family pod left, but the heater's broken." "You'll need extra blankets." Evan nodded. "We'll take it." She handed him a clipboard. "Sign here, Uncle Lark." The name landed heavier than he expected. He signed anyway. Minutes later, they followed a volunteer through a dim hallway lined with cots. The last door opened into a small room lit by a flickering bulb. A little girl lay bundled under coats and quilts on a narrow bed. Her breath came shallow and raspy, her cheeks flushed with fever. "Maya," Ben whispered, rushing forward. "I got the milk." "We can stay tonight." Evan set the bags on the rickety table, scanning the space automatically. Windows taped with cardboard. A space heater unplugged in the corner. A faint metallic smell. Gas? He crouched near the vent and frowned. "You shouldn't be breathing this air." Ben froze. "What do you mean?" "Carbon monoxide leak, maybe," Evan said, his tone sharpening. "We need to air this out." Now, he cracked the window and pulled the girl's blankets closer around her, instinctively checking her pulse. "She needs warmth, not poison." Ben's face went pale. "I didn't know. I just didn't want her to be cold." Evan's voice softened. "You did what you could." "That matters." He unzipped his coat and draped it over the girl. "We'll fix this," he said quietly, almost to himself. When he looked back at Ben, the boy was watching him. eyes wide, uncertain, searching for something he'd long stopped expecting from adults. Evan exhaled and said, "Let's start by keeping her safe." For the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about code, deadlines, or shareholders. Only the two children shivering in front of him, and the strange ache in his chest that told him he wasn't leaving tonight. Wind rattled the thin glass as the night deepened. The room smelled faintly of damp plaster and old fabric, but Evan's quick adjustments brought a pocket of warmth to life. He had set up the portable heater he'd retrieved from his car trunk, a spare from his office's winter emergency kit, and placed it in the center of the room. The flicker of orange light painted over cracked walls and patched flooring, softening the shadows. Ben knelt beside his sister, mixing the formula in a cup Evan had borrowed from the shelter's kitchen. Maya stirred faintly, her small hands clutching the blanket edges. "She hasn't eaten since yesterday," Ben murmured, his voice breaking just slightly. Evan handed him the cup and guided his hand to steady the spoon. Slowly, small sips. The boy nodded, watching every drop. The silence between them grew heavy but not uncomfortable. The heater hummed, fighting the cold that seeped in through the walls. Evan leaned back against the peeling wallpaper, running his fingers through his hair. He had spent the day finalizing an AI proposal for urban safety, a model designed to allocate heating resources across Chicago's poorest districts. It felt abstract in the boardroom, efficient on paper. But here, in this room, that same system had somehow failed two kids, sleeping on a mattress with frost on the windows. "How long has your mom been sick?" he asked quietly. Ben looked down. 2 weeks. She works at the diner near the train yard. When she got a cough, she still went in. Then she couldn't breathe one morning. They took her in an ambulance." He blinked fast, keeping his voice steady. "She told me to take care of Maya and not open the door for strangers." Evan nodded slowly. "You've done more than most adults could." The boy hesitated, studying him. "You don't sound like a regular uncle." Evan almost smiled. "That's because I'm not very good at pretending." Ben frowned, uncertain if it was a joke. "You talk like people on TV." Evan tilted his head. "And how do people on TV talk? Like everything's going to be okay, even when it isn't." Evan's breath caught, surprised by the boy's quiet perception. He turned toward the window, watching the snowfall blur into the orange glow of the streetlights. "Sometimes," he said, saying it out loud makes it true. Ben touched the train token hanging from his neck, rubbing it with his thumb until it caught the heater's glow. "My dad used to say that too." Evan leaned forward, voice low. "You miss him?" The boy nodded, gaze fixed on the flickering light. "I don't remember much. Just his gloves and his voice. He said he'd be home before dark, but the storm came faster. Mom told me he stayed on the train to keep people calm. She says that's what heroes do, stay until everyone's safe." The words struck Evan harder than he expected. For a moment, the weight of his own father's absence, the man who had measured love in milestones and profits, pressed heavy against his ribs. He had sworn not to be like him, yet here he was, realizing he'd spent years choosing work over warmth, precision over presence. He looked back at the boy. "Your dad sounds like a good man." Ben smiled faintly. "He is. I mean, was. I keep thinking he's still helping people somewhere. Maybe with the trains in heaven." The heater popped softly. Maya's breathing steadied, the rasp turning into slow, even rhythm. Evan rose, checked the temperature near the window, and adjusted the seal with duct tape from his briefcase. "You're both safe tonight," he said finally. "That's what matters." Ben looked up, voice trembling. "Are you leaving now?" Evan hesitated at the door. The storm outside howled against the glass. "Not tonight," he said, pulling an extra blanket from the shelf. "I'll stay until the morning." The boy exhaled, a small sigh that sounded like trust rediscovered. Evan set his phone on silent and slid it into his pocket. For the first time in years, he didn't check messages or deadlines. He simply sat down near the heater, listening to the soft breathing of the two children as the snow piled higher against the windows. Somewhere deep inside, a switch flipped, a quiet, irreversible decision he couldn't yet name. Morning crept in pale and cold. The storm had slowed, leaving the city wrapped in layers of white silence. Through the taped window, sunlight glinted off icicles like glass pendants. Evan blinked awake in the chair, stiff from sleeping upright. His overcoat, draped across both kids, was heavy with warmth and the faint scent of cedar and snow. Ben was already up, crouched by the window, tracing train tracks in the frost with his finger. Maya slept curled against the blanket, her breathing soft but steady. Evan rubbed his eyes, then checked his phone. Over 40 missed notifications, 2 from his COO labeled urgent. He ignored them. "You didn't leave," Ben said quietly without turning. Evan stretched, his voice hoarse. "I said I wouldn't." The boy nodded as if confirming something to himself. "Most people do." Evan looked at the cracked ceiling. "Then most people are wrong." He stood, his joints protesting from the cold, and took stock of the room. "How long have you lived here?" "Since Dad died," Ben answered. "Mom works the diner and pays rent, but the landlord stopped fixing stuff." He pointed toward the window. "That's why we use the tape." Evan stepped closer to the heater he'd brought, making sure it was still running safely. The air was warmer now, faintly breathable. "You could have called for repairs," he said absently. Mom tried. They said the system's old. Evan crouched beside the wall outlet. Old doesn't mean impossible. He took out a small black device from his briefcase, a compact CO sensor prototype from his company's winter safety division. He switched it on. The digital display blinked to life, steady green. Ben tilted his head. "What's that?" "Something I helped build," Evan said. "It tells us if the air's dangerous." "Like a robot nose?" Evan smiled faintly. "Exactly." He set the sensor on the table where its small light glowed steady. "If it ever turns red, it means you open a window and get out." "Understand?" Ben nodded solemnly. "Got it." They shared instant oatmeal for breakfast, donated packets mixed with lukewarm water. Ben insisted on saving half for later. As they ate, Evan asked, "When's your mom coming home?" Ben swallowed hard. "They said when she can breathe on her own again." "She's in St. Mercy Hospital." He hesitated. "But we can't visit until I find someone to watch Maya." Evan looked at him, this small boy managing emergencies like a seasoned adult. "You shouldn't have to do that alone." Ben stared into his cup. "Everybody's alone sometimes." The words hit harder than they should have. Evan's throat tightened as he thought of his penthouse. Sleek surfaces, silent walls, automated heat that never faltered. He had built an empire designed to optimize comfort, yet he couldn't remember the last time warmth felt earned. He stood, buttoning his coat. "I'll be back." Ben frowned. "Where are you going?" "To fix something," Evan said. He stepped outside into the blinding white light. Snow crunched under his shoes as he walked toward his car. The street was nearly deserted, only the low hum of snowplows in the distance. Evan dialed a number. "Jenna," he said when his chief of staff answered, "divert 3 of our prototype CO units to the Riverline District and send a repair team to 428 Birch Street. Heater, windows, insulation, the works." "Sir?" Jenna's voice was wary. "That's residential." "I know," Evan said. "Bill it under R&D field testing." He hung up and turned back to the building. Through the window, he saw Ben kneeling by Maya, tucking the blanket closer around her shoulders. The sight made something inside him ache. Simple, quiet devotion in a world that offered them so little. When he returned inside, the sensor beeped once, confirming clean air. Ben looked up. "Was that your robot nose talking?" Evan smiled faintly. "Yeah, it says your room's safe now." Maya stirred and blinked open her eyes. "Is it morning?" she whispered, her voice weak but curious. Ben grinned. "Yeah, we made it through the night." Evan knelt beside her bed. "You're feeling better?" She nodded slowly. "Are you our uncle?" Evan hesitated just long enough for Ben to glance at him. "For now," he said gently. Maya smiled sleepily, trusting the answer. As sunlight pooled across the floorboards, Evan glanced at the train token resting on the table. Its edges caught the light. Dull brass, but warm somehow. He thought of the boy's father, a man who had stayed on a frozen train so others could live. And he wondered, not for the first time, what it meant to stay when leaving was easier. "Keep that token safe," Evan said softly. "It'll help you find your way home again." Ben nodded. "I never lose it." Neither of them noticed the small red light blinking faintly on the sensor, a silent alert to Evan's phone, marking this building's coordinates. The AI system he had designed would flag it within minutes. But this time, he wouldn't be reviewing data from a glass tower. This time, he'd be there himself. It was 2:03 a.m. when Evan's phone shrilled from the nightstand beside his bed. The sound cut through the quiet of his penthouse. Glass, steel, and silence perched 30 floors above the frozen city. He blinked against the dark, disoriented for half a second before recognizing the alert tone. Not a text, not a call. The Warmline emergency system. The CO detector he'd left at 428 Birch Street had gone red. Carbon monoxide danger. Immediate response required. Evan sat upright, heart pounding. He pulled on his wool coat and didn't bother with gloves. The wind outside howled across Lake Michigan as he ran to the elevator, punching the button with shaking fingers. Within minutes, he was in his car, tires skidding as he accelerated onto the near-empty streets. The city looked ghostly at this hour. Stoplights blinked uselessly against sheets of snow. Emergency sirens wailed somewhere far off, lost in the wind. Evan gripped the wheel tighter, replaying every detail of that tiny room, the cracked windows, the heater near the bed, Maya's shallow breathing. When he reached Birch Street, the scene hit him like a physical blow. Snow piled against the stoop, the building half hidden in shadow. No lights inside. His car door slammed, echoing through the empty street. He pounded on the door, no answer. The air already felt wrong, still and heavy, a taste of metal on his tongue. He kicked the door once, twice. On the third hit, the lock gave way. The stench hit immediately. He yanked his scarf up over his mouth and charged through the narrow hall. "Ben!" he shouted, his voice raw. "Maya!" No response. His eyes darted toward the small room at the end. The heater still glowed, faint and dangerous. Maya was slumped against her blanket, her little hand limp at her side. Ed was sitting on the floor near her, head resting on the bed frame, unconscious but breathing shallowly. "God!" Evan gasped, crossing the room in 3 strides. He threw the window open, the rush of cold air biting at his face. He lifted Maya first, wrapping her in his coat, then shook Ben gently. Hey, kid, wake up. You're okay. You're safe." Ben stirred weakly, eyes fluttering open, confused and dazed. "Uncle? Evan?" "I'm here," Evan said, pulling him close. "Breathe. Deep. Slow." The child coughed, the sound ragged but alive. Evan's throat burned as he carried Maya into the hall, half dragging Ben with his free hand. Outside, the sirens he'd triggered from his phone drew closer, a rising wail of salvation cutting through the storm. Within moments, EMTs flooded the hallway, their flashlights bouncing off the walls. Evan barked instructions like he was back in a crisis meeting. 2 victims, both minors, carbon monoxide exposure. Get oxygen on them now. One paramedic, a woman with frost clinging to her lashes, paused when she recognized him. "Mr. Lark?" He ignored the question, kneeling beside Ben as they fitted a mask over the boy's face. "You're going to be okay," he said quietly. "Your sister, too." Ben's fingers tightened around his sleeve. "Don't leave us." Evan's jaw locked. "I won't. Not ever again." He followed the ambulance to St. Mercy, his own car tailing the flashing lights through empty intersections. Snow blurred everything beyond the windshield, a smear of white and red, But inside he felt sharper than he had in years, terrified, furious, alive. At the hospital, the children were wheeled into the ER. Nurses moved quickly, voices calm but urgent. Evan stayed outside the glass partition, watching Maya's small frame disappear under oxygen tubes, Ben's hand still clutching the train token, even in sleep. A doctor finally stepped out, pulling down his mask. "They're stable," he said. "Mild CO poisoning, caught just in time. You probably saved their lives." Evan nodded faintly, the adrenaline draining out of him in one long shiver. "I need to see them." The doctor hesitated. "Family only." Evan met his eyes. "I'm their guardian tonight." The man studied him for a moment, then opened the door. Inside, the soft hum of monitors filled the room. Ben lay in one bed, Maya in another. Her tiny fingers curled loosely round the edge of a blanket. Evan stood between them, his reflection faint in the glass. Ben's eyes blinked open again, heavy with exhaustion. "You came back," he whispered. "I promised I would." "People promise all the time," Ben murmured, voice fading. "They just don't mean it." Evan bent closer, his words quiet, steady. "This one does." He stayed there long after the doctor left, one hand resting on the bed rail, the other gripping the chair back so tightly his knuckles whitened. For the first time in years, the man who built systems to predict disaster realized something simple. No algorithm could measure the weight of staying. Outside, the first streak of dawn cut across the skyline, a faint, hopeful line of light over the frozen lake. The fluorescent hum of the hospital corridor was the only sound that cut through the hush of early morning. Evan sat by the bedside, the sleeves of his charcoal coat rolled to the elbows, a paper cup of untouched coffee cooling in his hand. The rhythmic beep of the monitors steadied him more than caffeine ever could. Maya slept under a thin blanket, her chest rising gently with each breath. Ben sat propped up in the next bed, awake but quiet, staring at the oxygen tubing looped around his sister's face. His small hand still clutched the train token, the brass dulled by sweat and time. Evan's phone vibrated. The screen lit up with his COO's name, Jenna Collins. He silenced it without hesitation. Then came the hospital door creaking open. A nurse peeked in. "They're both stable," she said kindly. "You can stay, but Child Protective Services will need to speak with you in the morning. Standard procedure." Evan nodded, rubbing his temple. "Understood." When she left, Ben shifted his gaze toward him. "CPS? They make sure kids are safe," he explained softly. "They'll take us," Ben said. It wasn't fear in his tone, it was knowledge, the kind of understanding a child shouldn't have. "They always say that." "Safe means somewhere else." Evan set the cup aside and moved closer. "Not this time." Ben looked at him with suspicion, eyes wide and tired. "How do you know?" "Because I won't let them." The boy studied him for a long moment, as if weighing the truth in those words. "You don't even know us." Evan hesitated, then said quietly, "Maybe not yet. But I will." Maya stirred, her small voice groggy. "Ben?" Her brother leaned over immediately. "I'm here. We're in a hospital, remember? The man with the heater helped us." Evan smiled faintly. "That's me, I guess." Maya blinked up at him, her eyes soft and glassy. "You look like the people in Mom's stories." "What kind of stories?" Evan asked. "The ones where someone comes back." The words struck deep. Evan cleared his throat. "Well, then she's a good storyteller." The nurse returned a few hours later with a clipboard. "Mr. Lark," she said, careful, professional. "CPS will arrive within the hour. They'll need an emergency contact. Are you family?" He opened his mouth, then closed it. Family. The word felt fragile, but right. "I'm their temporary guardian," he said finally. "For now, that'll do." The nurse hesitated, then handed him a form. "Sign here." Evan took the pen, the paper trembling slightly under his hand. His name looked strange beside theirs. Evan Lark, written in clean, deliberate strokes under Benjamin and Maya Turner. Ben watched him, frowning. You mean it? I do. When the CPS worker arrived, a woman in a gray sweater with a clipboard and calm, practiced tone, Evan stood as she introduced herself. Mr. Lark, I understand you're volunteering as the children's emergency guardian? He nodded. Until their mother recovers. Hospital records show she's being treated for severe pneumonia at St. Mercy East, the woman said, scanning her file. No other relatives? Ben shook his head. It's just us. Evan stepped forward. Then I'll take responsibility. You have my company's information for verification. The woman's brow furrowed slightly. Your company? Lark Systems, he said evenly. We manage the city's AI infrastructure, including your department's winter logistics. Her posture changed immediately. Ah, I see. She softened her tone, glancing toward the kids. If that's the case, we can list you as their temporary guardian for 72 hours. After that, we'll schedule a hearing. Ben's voice quivered. Does that mean we can stay with him? The woman smiled gently. For now, yes. When she left, Ben looked at Evan, a cautious smile tugging at his lips. You really signed for us. Evan sat back down, his expression unreadable, but his voice steady. You asked me last night if I was going to disappear in the morning. He looked toward the faint sunlight slanting across the sterile floor. I'm still here. Ben nodded, gripping the token tightly. Then maybe Mom was right. Evan tilted his head. About what? She said good things happen when you least believe they will. For a long moment, neither spoke. The hospital machines beeped softly, marking time like a heartbeat neither of them wanted to disturb. Evan reached over and adjusted the blanket over Maya's shoulder. Get some rest, Ben. I'll stay until you wake up. Ben's eyelids fluttered. You promise? I promise. By the time the morning sun touched the skyline outside, the boy had fallen asleep again, one hand still wrapped around the token, the other curled near Evan's coat sleeve. Evan sat motionless, watching the light rise over the frozen city. For the first time in years, the dawn meant something. The next morning, Chicago gleamed beneath a sheet of white so bright it looked untouched. Frost curled along the hospital windows like lace. Evan stood by the glass, phone pressed to his ear, his voice low but firm. Cancel the quarterly press call, he told Jenna. There was a pause on the other end. Sir, the board expects you in New York by noon. They'll have to expect something else, he replied. Reschedule for next week, and tell PR not to comment on my absence. Jenna hesitated. Evan, people are talking. Photos from the shelter incident leaked through emergency dispatch. You were seen carrying a child. The press is spinning it as a publicity stunt. Evan's jaw tightened. Then they can print the truth. I'm taking care of 2 kids who nearly died because our city's safety net failed. That's your statement. He ended the call before she could answer. Behind him, Ben stirred awake, blinking at the light. Maya slept still, her oxygen tube removed now, cheeks pink with returning warmth. Morning, Ben whispered. Evan turned. How's the patient? She's better, Ben said proudly, then quieter. You really didn't leave. I told you I wouldn't. Ben hesitated, fiddling with the train token around his neck. They said we can go today. But we don't have anywhere. Evan thought for a moment. You can stay with me until your mom gets better. Ben's eyes widened. At your house? Evan nodded once. You'll have your own rooms? Warm ones. But, the boy hesitated. You're rich, right? Evan raised an eyebrow, half amused. Something like that. People like you don't live with people like us. Evan crouched down to meet his gaze. Maybe people like me should have started a long time ago. The boy didn't answer, but his small, uncertain smile said enough. An hour later, paperwork signed and clearances stamped, they left the hospital. The cold wind bit their cheeks as Evan opened the door of his black sedan. Maya, bundled in an oversized coat, stared at the leather seats with wide eyes. It smells clean, she whispered. Evan helped her buckle. In That's what happens when no one spills cocoa, he said lightly. Ben snorted. We can fix that. The drive through downtown felt almost surreal. They passed frozen fountains and commuters bundled in gray coats, the city's chaos muffled by snow. From the back seat, Maya leaned against the window, whispering, It's like we're flying. When the car finally turned into the private drive leading up to Evan's penthouse building, Ben's mouth fell open. The steel tower rose above the skyline, sleek and gleaming against the winter haze. You live here? He asked. For now, Evan replied, pulling into the underground garage. An attendant in a dark uniform approached to open the door, stopping short when he saw the children. Evan gave a curt nod that ended any questions before they began. Please bring up the rest of the hospital bags to the 43rd floor. Yes, sir. Upstairs, the elevator doors opened to silence. The penthouse stretched before them. Glass walls, white marble floors, everything immaculate and cold. No toys, no clutter, no warmth. Ben's voice echoed softly. It's like a museum. Maya clung to her brother's coat sleeve. Do we have to be careful? Evan took off his gloves, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. Not as careful as you think. He walked to the kitchen, pressed a button, and the coffee machine hummed to life. The aroma filled the air, rich and unfamiliar to the children. You hungry? He asked. Ben nodded. A little. Evan rolled up his sleeves. Then we'll start with pancakes. Ben blinked. You cook? Evan hesitated. I read instructions. The boy laughed, a small, real sound that bounced off the marble. Together they mixed batter too thick, burned one pancake, and flipped another that landed halfway on the counter. Maya clapped anyway. When they finally sat to eat, the silence felt different, lighter somehow. Maya dipped her fork into syrup, smiling so wide Evan almost forgot how cold his home had always been. She looked up, at him shyly. Do we really get to stay? Evan nodded, his voice softer than he intended. For as long as you need. Ben watched him carefully, studying the man across the table. Then I'll keep my dad's token here, he said, placing it gently on the marble surface. So he knows where we are. Evan froze for a second, staring at the dull brass circle glinting in the morning light. Something in his chest shifted, slow and certain. That sounds right, he murmured. Let's make sure he always finds you. Outside, the storm had finally cleared, revealing a skyline of ice-bright blue. Inside, for the first time in years, Evan Lark's home felt alive, filled not with noise, but with something better. Breath, laughter, and the fragile sound of warmth returning. The day settled into a rhythm none of them expected. By afternoon, sunlight poured through the glass walls of the penthouse, reflecting off the snow-covered city below. The skyline shimmered like a frozen ocean, and for the first time in years, Evan's home didn't feel like a mausoleum. Maya sat cross-legged on the living room rug, building a tiny train out of wooden blocks from a toy set Evan had ordered that morning. Ben was perched on a stool near the massive kitchen island, watching pancakes sizzle on a cast-iron pan. Evan, sleeves rolled, tie loosened, moved awkwardly between the counter and the stove, more engineer than chef. Flip it now, Ben said, pointing. I think it's too early, Evan countered, squinting at the bubbling batter. Ben grinned. You'll burn it if you wait. Evan hesitated, flipped, and splattered syrup across the countertop. Maya laughed so hard she fell backward onto the carpet. That, Evan said dryly, was a design flaw. He handed Ben the spatula. Your turn, chef. The boy took it seriously, moving with concentration. When he succeeded, he looked up at Evan, proud and glowing. See? Easy Evan smiled, a real one this time, the kind that softened his features and erased years of stress. Remind me to hire you next quarter. What's a quarter? Maya piped up. It's when you fix everything you broke in the last 3 months, Evan replied, and Ben burst into laughter. By noon, the penthouse smelled of butter, coffee, and warmth. The floor was dotted with crumbs. The the sink full of dishes, a chaos Evan didn't realize he'd missed. While the kids ate, he scrolled through his inbox. Messages from his board filled the screen. Warnings, questions, demands, image risk, PR volatility, public perception crisis. He closed the laptop. Not today. Instead, he walked to the balcony. The glass doors slid open, letting in a rush of cold air that bit at his skin. He looked down at the city, rows of rooftops buried under snow. Somewhere down there were hundreds of children just like Ben and Maya. Families relying on shelters, his company's software failed to connect in time. He pulled out his phone, thumb hovering over a name. Dr. Lin, R&D Division. Dr. Lin, he said when the line picked up, I need to reassign your current project. We're pivoting Etherlink to Warmline full-time. There was a pause. Sir, that's a humanitarian branch. The board froze its budget last quarter. They'll unfreeze it, Evan said. Effective immediately. I want real-time shelter data integrated with the city grid, and I want every cold risk zone mapped by tomorrow night. Tomorrow? Sir, that's impossible without... Then make it possible, he said calmly. I'll handle the board. He hung up, the cold air stinging his face, but something inside him burned bright. For the first time in years, the numbers weren't abstract. They had names, faces, stories. Behind him, Ben's voice echoed from the kitchen. Mr. Lark? Do rich people work on weekends? Evan turned, smiling faintly. Some of us do, if it's for the right reasons. What reason's that? Evan walked back inside, kneeling to help Maya connect the last block to her tiny wooden train. Making sure nobody freezes again, Pet looked up at him, serious. That's a good reason. When evening came, they watched the city lights blink on, one by one. Evan let them pick a movie, something animated and loud. Maya curled against his arm halfway through, fast asleep before the credits rolled. Ben sat on the other side of the couch, chin resting on his knees, quiet and thoughtful. After a long silence, he said softly, She used to laugh like this before Mom got sick. Evan's chest tightened. She'll laugh like that again, he said. You both will. Ben looked up. You think so? I don't think, Evan said. I'm sure. The boy studied him, eyes reflecting the flicker of the television. You talk like you've already fixed it. Evan smiled gently. Not yet. But I'm learning how Ben nodded, seeming to accept that. Then he reached into his pocket and placed the train token on the coffee table, right beside the remote. So Dad knows where we are tonight. Evan stared at the small circle of brass gleaming under the lamplight. It seemed to glow warmer in this place, as if recognizing a new kind of home. He whispered, That's a good spot for it. Outside, the storm broke completely. The city lights shimmered across the snow, and from high above, it looked as if every street was stitched together by warmth. The following morning arrived soft and gray, the kind of quiet that comes after a storm finally spends itself. Snow had settled on the window ledges like powdered sugar, muting the usual city noise below. The penthouse was still, too still, until a knock sounded at the door. Evan set down his coffee and opened it to find a woman in a navy coat and a messenger bag. Her badge read, Marissa Dale, Department of Family Services. She smiled politely, but her eyes were sharp. Mr. Lark, I'm here for the welfare check. Ben froze mid-bite at the kitchen island. Maya looked up from coloring a train on a paper placemat. Evan gestured her in. Of course. Come in. Marissa stepped inside, her gaze flicking over the polished floors, the pristine furniture, and the two children sitting in oversized kitchen chairs. You have quite a home, she said. Not many emergency guardians take children somewhere like this. Evan's expression didn't waver. They needed warmth. She nodded, flipping open her folder. That's what I'm here to verify. While she spoke with Maya, gentle questions about meals, sleep, and how she felt. Ben kept his hand on the train token resting against his chest. When Marissa turned to him, her tone was kind but clinical. And you, Ben? Has Mr. Lark treated you well? Ben frowned slightly. He stayed when he didn't have to. Her pen paused mid-note. That's good to hear. But do you feel safe? Ben nodded. Yeah, he fixed our air and brought us here. My sister stopped coughing. That's safe, right? Marissa smiled faintly. That's very safe. Still, she turned toward Evan with a professional calm that held weight. I have to ask directly, Mr. Lark, what's your relationship to these children beyond this week? Evan hesitated. He could have deflected with corporate polish, but something about Ben's steady gaze pushed him toward honesty. They needed help. I had the ability to give it. That's all the relationship I needed to start. Marissa closed her folder halfway. You understand how that sounds from a procedural standpoint? I do, Evan said, but maybe procedure isn't what these kids need right now. There was something in his tone that made her stop writing. It wasn't arrogance, it was conviction. She studied him for a long moment. What's this? She asked suddenly, noticing the brass token glinting on the table. Ben lifted it proudly. It's my dad's train token. I keep it so he knows where we are. Marissa knelt beside him. That's a special thing to hold on to. It means home, Ben said softly, even if it's not the same place anymore. Marissa glanced up at Evan. He's a thoughtful boy. Evan's voice was low. He's strong. They both are she. Straightened. I can tell. For what it's worth, I believe you're doing the right thing. But my office will still need updates. I'll recommend continuing placement until their mother is medically cleared. That's fair, Evan said. When she left, the door clicked softly behind her, leaving a silence that lingered. Ben looked up at Evan. Did we do something wrong? No, Evan said, crouching to meet his eyes. She just needed to see you were okay. Ben frowned. She looked like she didn't believe you at first. Evan smiled faintly. She'll learn. People usually do. He turned back toward the windows, where the skyline glowed faintly beneath the gray. His phone buzzed again, this time a push alert from a local news site. Tech CEO's mysterious rescue raises questions. Is Warmline a publicity move? Evan scrolled briefly, then locked the screen. Maya tugged on his sleeve. Was that about us? He crouched beside her, smoothing a stray curl from her forehead. It's about me. People talks when they don't understand something. That's their noise, not ours. Does it make you sad? She asked. Evan paused, surprised by the question. It used to. Not anymore. Why not? Because I finally did something that matters. Ben watched him, thoughtful. Even if they call it fake? Evan met his gaze. Especially then. The boy nodded slowly, as if filing that away somewhere deep. Then he looked toward the token on the table. Can I put it by the window? So Dad can see it? Evan helped him find the perfect spot, right where the morning light touched the brass, making it shine like gold. The three of them stood for a moment, watching the city beyond the glass. Snow, steam, and faint lines of trains moving in the distance. Maya slipped her small hand into Evan's. It's warm here, she said simply. He glanced down, startled by how right she was. For years, this home had been nothing but a fortress of quiet efficiency. Now, it was something else entirely. It's supposed to be, he said. It's supposed to stay that way. And somewhere deep in the frozen city, the first Warmline notifications began to ping. Shelters connecting, buses rerouting to warming centers, families finding their way out of the cold. Evan exhaled, the weight on his shoulders finally easing. For once, technology wasn't just saving data, it was saving lives. By the next morning, Evan's name was on every news ticker in the city. Billionaire CEO saves 2 children from carbon monoxide leak. Hero or PR move? Flashed across screens in the hospital lobby, the subway platforms, and even the lobby of his own headquarters downtown. Inside the penthouse, though, none of that noise reached Ben or Maya. They sat on the rug eating cereal, Maya's curls haloed by sunlight, Ben quietly reading the back of the box. Evan stood at the window, coffee in hand, watching headlines scroll silently on his muted television. His phone buzzed again. This time, Jenna's voice came tight with frustration. Evan, the board, wants a statement. Investors are panicking over the warm line pivot and the story about the kids. They think you've lost perspective. He looked at his reflection in the glass, creased suit, tired eyes, and for once a trace of peace. Perspective's the only thing I haven't lost, he said. Evan, set a press conference for noon. I'll handle it myself. Jenna sighed audibly. You know they'll turn this into a circus. They already did, he said, and ended the call. He turned from the window to find Ben watching him. Are you in trouble? Evan smiled faintly. Maybe a little. Because of us? He crouched beside the boy, steady and calm. Because of me. I made choices they don't understand yet. Ben tilted his head. You don't look scared. I am, Evan admitted, but not enough to stop. At noon, the conference room at Lark Systems was packed with cameras, microphones, and flashes that felt more like lightning than light. The company's logo glowed cold and corporate behind him as reporters jostled for position. He adjusted his tie once, then faced them head on. One voice rose above the din. Mr. Lark, why did a man of your stature get involved with two homeless children? Are they part of your warm line PR campaign? Evan's blue eyes didn't flinch. No, he said simply. They're part of my life now. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Another reporter shouted, Are you aware your actions have wiped over $50 million from Lark Systems' valuation this morning? Evan nodded. I am. But if a company can lose $50 million for doing the right thing, maybe the problem isn't what I did. It's what we've become. The room went still. The cameras zoomed closer. He continued, voice steady but low, carrying an intensity that didn't need volume. We build machines to predict risk. We measure impact in numbers. But last week I found two children freezing in a room where our data said the system was functioning perfectly. Our models didn't fail. The humans behind them did. Me included. He paused, the silence heavy. So yes, I stayed with those children. I carried them through a storm. I'm not sorry for it. And Warmline isn't a PR stunt. It's the next phase of what we should have been doing all along, keeping people alive. A young journalist near the front lowered her camera slightly. So you're prioritizing humanitarian work over profit? Evan smiled faintly. I'm prioritizing humanity. Profit will survive. The room broke into murmurs again, flashes popping like snowfall. He didn't wait for the next question. That's all for today, he said, stepping away from the podium. Outside the building, the city air bit sharp and clean. He inhaled deeply, the cold burning his lungs in a way that felt cleansing. By the time he returned home, the penthouse lights glowed warm through the glass. Ben met him at the door, holding a folded sheet of paper. Maya drew this, he said shyly. Evan unfolded it. Crayon lines, 3 figures standing in front of tall windows, hand in hand. The tallest one had blue dots for eyes. Above them, in shaky letters, it read, Don't let us wait alone. He stared at it longer than he intended, throat tightening. She's good, he said softly. Ben nodded. She said it's us. You, me, and her, Evan smiled. She got the windows right. Ben hesitated. Are we in trouble because of the reporters? Evan shook his head. No, trouble's just what happens before people start listening. Maya appeared from the hallway, rubbing her eyes. Did they make you mad? He crouched to her level, his voice warm. They tried. But you can't fight someone who's busy doing better. She grinned sleepily. Then you're winning. He chuckled. We'll see. That evening, they cooked dinner together again. Real spaghetti this time, not instant noodles. Sauce splattered, pasta overcooked, laughter echoing through the apartment. Afterward, the kids insisted on drawing while Evan answered late emails. When he finally looked up, Ben had fallen asleep on the couch, pencil still in hand. Maya dozed beside him, curled against his side. Between them on the coffee table lay the brass train token, catching the soft golden light from the lamp. Evan picked it up gently, turning it between his fingers. He could still feel its faint warmth. The engraving, faded but clear, read, Line 7, Homebound. He set it back down beside them, whispering to no one in particular. That's exactly what we are. Outside, across the city, the Warmline app surged online, pins lighting up where shelters reopened, where heaters were repaired, where hope returned like power after a blackout. Evan didn't know it yet, but by morning thousands would call the new platform a lifeline. For now, he just stood in the glow of his quiet apartment, watching two children sleep safe and warm for the first time in months. The courtroom smelled faintly of dust and winter coats. Snowmelt pooled near the entrance where families stamped in from the cold, their breath turning to mist in the fluorescent light. Evan sat at the long oak table, his navy suit pressed but his heart pounding harder than any investor meeting ever had. Across from him sat a CPS attorney, two caseworkers, and a judge whose reading glasses hung halfway down her nose. Ben sat beside him, feet not quite touching the floor, the train token dangling from his neck. Maya was at the end of the row, swinging her legs nervously. Their mother, Elena Turner, sat in a wheelchair, a blanket draped over her knees. She was pale, her breathing still shallow, but there was color in her face again. She'd only been released from the hospital that morning. Evan turned to her. You don't have to say anything if you're not ready, he whispered. She smiled weakly. I'm ready. You've done enough. When the judge finally looked up, her voice carried the calm precision of someone who'd seen every kind of heartbreak. This is an emergency guardianship review for minors, Benjamin and Maya Turner. Mr. Lark, you've been serving as their temporary guardian for 10 days? Yes, Your Honor, Evan said. You're not related to the children? No, ma'am. I met them during an emergency. Their home had a carbon monoxide leak. I was there when the alert triggered. The judge raised an eyebrow. And since then you've kept them under your care? Yes. A murmur rippled through the gallery. Reporters, maybe, or curious clerks who recognized his face from headlines. Evan ignored it. The CPS attorney stood. Your Honor, we acknowledge Mr. Lark's intervention likely saved the children's lives. However, the department recommends returning them to their biological mother's care once her recovery allows. We question whether Mr. Lark's continued involvement serves the children's long-term stability. Ben's hand tightened on the table. Evan glanced down and saw the boy's knuckles go white. Elena spoke suddenly, her voice frail but steady. If I may, Your Honor. The judge nodded. My children were alive because of him, Shide said. Because someone like him, someone who didn't have to, stayed. I'm grateful every breath I take, but I'm still weak. I can't lift Maya. I can't walk Ben to school. And if you send them back to that apartment now, it'll break them. The courtroom went silent. Ben stood up abruptly, his small voice shaking but clear. Your Honor? The judge blinked, surprised. Yes, young man? Ben swallowed hard and reached into his pocket. He took out the train token and held it up so it caught the light. This was my dad's. He worked the winter line when it froze. Mom says he stayed to help people get off safe. He never came home. So I keep this to remember where home is. He stepped closer to the bench. We had to move a lot. Shelters, people's couches, sometimes nowhere. But when Mr. Lark helped us, it was the first time I didn't have to remember where home was. I just knew. Even the stenographer paused, eyes glistening. Ben placed the token gently on the edge of the table before the judge. Don't need money. I just need someone who stays. The judge didn't speak for several seconds. When she did, her voice was softer. You've got a good heart, son. She turned to Evan. And you, Mr. Lark, why are you here? You could have handed them to authorities and walked away. Evan met her gaze. Because I've spent my life building systems to protect people, and I finally realized none of it matters if I can't protect the ones right in front of me. The judge's expression shifted, something between sternness and compassion. This court will grant a provisional guardianship extension for 90 days. During that time, Mr. Lark, you'll assist Ms. Turner in her recovery and ensure the children's stability. After 90 days, we'll revisit permanent arrangements. Maya clapped her hands before remembering where she was. Elena covered her mouth, tears spilling freely. The judge gave a small smile. Court is adjourned. As the gavel fell, Ben turned to Evan. Does that mean you're coming back tomorrow? Evan rested a hand on the boy's shoulder. Every tomorrow. Outside, the wind was bitter, but the sky had cleared, sunlight glancing off the courthouse steps. Elena moved slowly in her chair, while Evan helped the kids bundle into their coats. When they reached the sidewalk, Ben pressed the token into Evan's hand. Hold it until we're home again. Evan closed his fingers around it, feeling its worn edges dig into his palm. Deal. He looked up at the glass towers glinting in the cold, and thought, for the first time in years, that maybe the city didn't feel so hollow after all. Snow began falling again by dusk, soft, unhurried flakes that blurred the courthouse lights into golden halos. Evan walked beside Elena's wheelchair as they made their way down the long ramp, Ben and Maya flanking them like tiny guards. The day's tension had left everyone silent, but it wasn't a heavy silence. It was relief, fragile and bright as the snow itself. When they reached the curb, his driver stepped forward to help, but Evan waved him off gently. We'll take it from here. Elena looked up at him, still pale but stronger than she had been in weeks. You don't have to keep doing this, she said softly. They've already taken enough of your time. Evan knelt beside her wheelchair so she wouldn't have to look up. Time is the only thing that matters, he said. I just learned that too late. Her eyes shimmered, and for a moment she couldn't speak. I don't know how to repay you. You already have, he said quietly, glancing at the kids who were making small snowballs and stacking them on a railing. You gave me back something I didn't realize I'd lost. She followed his gaze. What's that? He smiled faintly. The reason I built all of this. The drive back to the city was quiet. Maya hummed to herself in the back seat, half asleep, while Ben leaned his head against the window, eyes fixed on the streaks of streetlight. When they arrived at the penthouse, Elena hesitated. Are you sure? She asked. I don't want to be a burden. Evan opened the door and gestured toward the warm glow inside. This isn't a burden. It's home until yours is ready. Upstairs, Mrs. Peterson, his housekeeper, had already set up a smaller bedroom for Elena near the children's rooms. Fresh sheets, soft lighting, a vase of lilies that looked almost too perfect to be real. Elena's breath caught. I haven't seen flowers in months. Maya tugged her mother's sleeve. He even made pancakes, Mom. Elena laughed weakly. Pancakes? The fancy kind? Ben grinned. Mostly the burnt kind. That night, after everyone had settled, Evan stood alone by the floor-to-ceiling window. The city glittered beneath him, each light a story he would never know. On the reflection of the glass, he could see the faint outline of the train token hanging from his wrist where Ben had tied it with a shoelace. Behind him, small footsteps padded across the hardwood. Ben appeared in the doorway, still in his socks. Can't sleep? Evan asked. Ben shook his head. Mom's still coughing a little. I wanted to check if you were awake. I am. The boy came closer, stopping beside him. When Dad was alive, he used to say trains always find their tracks again, even after a storm. Evan looked down. That's true. Ben hesitated. I think we found ours. Evan's throat tightened. You did more than that, Ben. You helped me find mine, too. The boy smiled, shy but certain. Good. Then we can share. They stood side by side, the city sprawling endless below. The snow fell thicker now, cloaking the streets in silence. Evan realized that for the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about tomorrow's meetings, profit margins, or quarterly forecasts. He was thinking about breakfast, about how Maya liked her cocoa too hot and Ben hated syrup on his pancakes. He was thinking about warmth and laughter and second chances. By the end of the week, Elena could walk short distances with a cane. Every morning, the four of them ate together. Ben insisted on flipping the pancakes. Maya insisted on setting the table. Evan pretended not to notice when she always placed his cup first. One evening, a knock came at the door. It was Marissa Dale, the social worker, carrying a thin file and a rare smile. "Good news," she said. "The judge approved the 90-day guardianship officially. And Ms. Turner, you've been cleared for in-home recovery assistance. It's all finalized." Elena exhaled shakily. "So we stay?" Marissa nodded. "You stay." Together, Ben threw his arms around his mother. Maya squealed, running to join them. Evan stood a few steps back, hands in his pockets, trying and failing to hide the emotion behind his calm. Marissa closed her file and glanced at him. "Not every case ends like this, Mr. Lark." "Most don't. I hope you know that I do," he said. "That's why I'm not taking this one for granted." When the door closed behind her, the apartment filled with quiet again, the soft kind that feels earned. That night, Evan passed by the living room and stopped short. On the table sat the train token, now placed inside a small wooden frame Ben had made out of spare cardboard and tape. In blocky letters across the bottom, he had written, "Home is someone who waits for you." Evan stood there a long time, the weight of the words settling over him like the snow outside. Soft, undeniable, and exactly right. The winter thaw came slowly that year. By February, sunlight began spilling across Chicago's rooftops again, melting the snow into glittering veins of water that raced along the gutters. Evan stood at the window of his office downtown, the skyline bright and sharp beyond the glass. For the first time in years, he wasn't watching the stock ticker on the corner monitor. He was watching buses. Dozens of small dots moved across the Warmline live map projected on his screen, each one representing a shelter shuttle, an emergency heater dispatch, a family check-in. He zoomed out. Minneapolis, Detroit, Cleveland, all cities that had adopted the model in the past 6 weeks. Warmline had gone national. Behind him, Jenna knocked softly on the doorframe. "You really did it," she said, half smiling, half stunned. "They're calling it the most successful humanitarian rollout in company history. Even the mayor wants to honor you at the Civic Awards." Evan didn't turn. "Then we'll use that platform to push Phase 2, job programs for recovered families." Jenna shook her head, amused. "You know, most CEOs would have spun this as a redemption story. You just keep building." He finally looked at her, expression soft. "Redemption's not the point. Continuity is." Jenna smiled faintly. "The kids still keeping you honest?" He nodded. "Every day." When he returned to the penthouse that evening, the scene waiting for him could have belonged to another life entirely. Maya sat cross-legged on the living room floor, arranging crayons in careful rainbow rows. Ben was perched on the sofa, poring over a train map Evan had printed for him. Elena was in the kitchen, leaning on her cane as she stirred soup, her laughter light and unguarded. "Smells good in here," Evan said, slipping off his coat. Ben looked up, grinning. "Mom says I get to help cook tonight." "That's brave of her," Evan teased. Elena turned, arching an eyebrow. "You say that like you haven't set off a smoke alarm in this very kitchen," he feigned offense. "That was a controlled test." Maya giggled. "You burned pancakes." He surrendered with a laugh, raising both hands. "Guilty." Dinner was simple. Soup, bread, and laughter that filled every corner of the penthouse. They talked about Ben's schoolwork, Maya's growing obsession with building snow castles, and Elena's physical therapy milestones. The city lights blinked against the window like faraway stars. After the dishes were cleared, Ben carried something from his room, a small wooden box painted clumsily in red and blue. "I made this," he said, placing it on the table. Evan crouched down beside him. What's inside? Ben lifted the lid carefully. Inside lay the train token, polished now, resting on a soft square of felt. Next to it sat a folded piece of paper. We wrote you something, Ben said. Maya beamed. A thank you. Evan unfolded the note, the handwriting uneven but sincere. It read, greater than dear Mr. Lark. Greater than thank you for staying when everyone else left. Thank you for fixing heaters, cooking pancakes, and making our mom laugh again. You don't just make machines work, you make people warm. Love, Ben and Maya. Evan swallowed hard, blinking against the sting in his eyes. He looked up at them, two small faces glowing in the lamplight, the faint reflection of their mother's quiet pride behind them, and for once, words failed him. He reached out and gently closed the box, his fingers lingering on the rough paint. I don't deserve that, he said softly. Elena's voice came from behind him, calm but certain. You do, Habe. Turned, meeting her gaze. I just did what anyone should have done. That's exactly why it matters, she said. For a long moment the room held its breath. Then Maya broke the silence with a whisper. Can we keep it here next to the window? So Dad knows where to find us, and so Mr. Lark doesn't forget. Evan smiled faintly. I won't forget. Not ever. He placed the box by the same window where Ben had first left the token weeks ago. Outside, trains crossed the bridges in the distance, their lights streaking gold across the dark. Ben stood beside him, eyes wide. Do you think Dad would have liked you? Evan looked out at the tracks, the faint whistle echoing through the winter air. I think he already does, he said quietly. Behind them, Elena rested her hand on her son's shoulder. He'd be proud of all of you, she said, and maybe a little proud of this one too. Evan turned, smiling gently. That's more than enough for me. The city outside pulsed with quiet life. Warm line shuttles, shelter lights, families returning home. And in that glass tower overlooking it all, warmth glowed where there had once been nothing but light. The sun was setting over Union Station, casting a warm amber glow across the snow-laced tracks. The great iron roof above the platforms glimmered like copper beneath the fading light. Evan stood near the end of Platform 7, coat collar turned up against the cold. Beside him, Ben and Maya pressed close, their breaths fogging in the crisp air. Elena stood a few paces behind, leaning on her cane but smiling quietly as she watched them. Ben held something small in his mittened hand, the brass train token, polished so bright it caught every ray of light. The engraving, Line 7, homebound, shimmered softly. He looked up at Evan. This is where Dad worked. The green line starts right here. Evan nodded, his voice low. He helped a lot of people from this platform. Maya tugged at his sleeve. Are we here to ride the train? Not today, Evan said. We're here to remember. They walked together to the end of the platform, where the wind swept harder. Evan knelt down so he was eye level with them. Your dad gave everything to make sure people were safe. That's something worth keeping close. Ben hesitated, then held up the token. We wanted to leave it here, he said, so nobody forgets where home is. Evan looked at him, proud and aching all at once. You sure? Ben nodded. We made a new one together at home. This one should stay where he was. He placed the token into a small wooden frame he'd made from the same cardboard box as before, carefully sealed and signed in crooked handwriting, for the ones who stayed. He set it against the platform railing, right beside a weathered plaque, honoring railway workers lost in the blizzard a decade ago. The brass glowed in the amber light, like it belonged there. Evan rested a hand on Ben's shoulder. He'd be proud of you. Ben smiled faintly. He's proud of you too. Evan blinked. Me? Yeah, Ben said. Mom says Dad believed anyone can be family if they choose to stay. The words landed deep, quiet, steady, and final. Evan reached for the boy's hand, gripping it gently. Then I'm honored to be part of this family. Elena walked closer, the cold pinking her cheeks. You already are, she said softly. They stood there together as a train approached from the distance, its whistle echoing through the twilight. The wind tugged at their coats, carrying the faint warmth of the station lights. When the cars thundered past, Maya clapped her hands, giggling as her hair whipped around her face. Evan crouched to steady her, his laugh mingling with hers. Ben watched the last car disappear into the horizon, then turned back. Can I ask something? Anything, Evan said. Ben's voice wavered just slightly. If I get scared, can I call you Dad? Just sometimes? The question cracked something open in him. Years of loneliness, guilt, ambition, all folding into a single breath. Evan's throat tightened. He placed a hand on Ben's shoulder, steady, deliberate. You can call me Dad forever, he said. Ben's eyes filled, but he smiled through it. Okay, Dad. Elena turned away for a moment, wiping her cheek. Maya hugged Evan's leg, beaming. Then you're my dad, too. He laughed softly, scooping her up into his arms. Deal. They stood like that as the sun dipped below the skyline, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold. Around them the station hummed with distant announcements and the rhythmic clatter of departing trains, each one carrying someone home. Evan looked down at the framed token resting against the rail. The words, "For the ones who stayed," caught the last gleam of sunlight before the shadows claimed it. He took a deep breath, feeling the cold bite of the air and the deep, quiet warmth beneath it. For years, he'd built systems to predict the world, numbers, models, outcomes, but nothing had ever prepared him for this, the simple grace of belonging. As the night fell, Ben slipped his hand into his, small but sure. Together they walked toward the station exit, Elena beside them, Maya nestled in his arms. Behind them the trains roared and slowed and roared again, each whistle a reminder that no matter how far you drift, there's always a line that leads you home. And this time Evan Lark knew exactly where his ended.